Hi there, and welcome to another set of screencast notes here. Now we're looking at the age of exploration and colonization and whatnot, and so this is going to be a quick overview of some of the information that you're going to need to know for the AP. So this is a map of the world before 1492. The idea here is that you notice that with Italy over here and all of this, there is Africa is here, and there's these idea of the winds bringing it all in. But there's no North America, and there's not really a good idea of where everything is. So this is kind of what people were working with before all of this started. Now, why people went out? Well, there were some different motivations, and I always say these are the three big ones: God, glory, and gold. To spread Christianity, to win fame, and keep in mind, this has to do with humanism, the idea that people can go ahead and advance their own personal fame and their own personal wealth in order to do this. But the wealth is not only personal, but it also has to do with national wealth, which doesn't look very great on that picture, but you get the idea. National wealth being really important in terms of motivations to go out and do this. There's interest that's sparked by the Crusades because the Crusades kind of bring Europe back into the fold and have them encountering new peoples and wanting to go out and push for spreading Christianity and things like that. But it's this that I think is really, really important. As we've talked about, the rise of nation states really consolidates power in the hands of a few people. And when it does that, and then these people are able to muster the resources to be able to do this, and there's a trade competition between these big states. And there's also the impact of the Renaissance. Let me see if I can move this up. That isn't going to work, okay? Well, let's just go with impact of the Renaissance on this one. Because of the ideals there and because of everything else that goes on. And honestly, I don't know what that says down there, so we'll just kind of move on past it, I suppose. All right, but what allows them to do is the new technology that's out there. The magnetic compass helps because knowing which way is north when you're trying to sail across an ocean is typically a good thing. The quadrant and the astrolabe allow mariners to be able to measure the angles of stars and thus get an idea of where they are on the Earth, especially latitude-wise, which is really important. Are you too far north? Are you too far south? And all of that. Longitude takes longer for them to figure out, but those definitely help. And then ship technology is really big. The Portuguese create the caravel, which is light. And it's fast, and they're kind of small. These lateen sails they can swing back and forth, and they allow you to use the wind, which isn't necessarily behind you, to push you. Improvements in rudders and gunpowder, and that should say cannons, because those become very big. When you run into people who don't have cannons, tends to be a little bit of an advantage. So here's a few ideas of these things. This also becomes very big, the better maps. As this becomes sort of like state secrets, especially with the Portuguese as they're going out and they're mapping the coast of Africa. They don't want other people to know this stuff. They don't want to know where exactly these inlets are and all of this. They're highly, highly protected, but definitely technology, huge. What else is important? In many places, the idea of capitalist investment really is big because they create these things called joint stock companies. And in a joint stock company, a few people get together, they finance the voyage together, And if the voyage is successful, then they split the profits. If the voyage is a failure, then they split the losses. And it makes it so that you minimize the impact of an unsuccessful mission. So everybody shares liability, which, let's be honest, it makes you more able and probably more willing to go in and be a part of this. It also was hindered by, there's a problem with trading with Asia. And the problem with trading with Asia comes from the Ottomans, because in 1453 they take over Constantinople. They very quickly dominate the Mediterranean, and they basically shut Europe off from the spice trade, which has been a part of European trading for hundreds of years, and they just shut it off altogether. And then there are also these stories that are out there from the Middle Ages. Sir John Mandeville writes, we'll just say writes to make it easy, a book which talks about foreign lands with lots of very weird things, which, he talks about having gone there. Marco Polo tells of the great riches of the East in China from his time there. And then there's this myth of Prester John being this Christian king who owns a kingdom in Africa and is besieged on all sides by Muslims and needs. And here are some images of the world. These mostly come out of Mandeville's stuff, but weird people who have one leg that shades them. People who don't have a head, but their chest is part of the head. All of these weird curiosities, which make people, hey, I want to go check this out, kind of thing. And this is Prester John. Here's a map showing the possible extent, this being the extent of the kingdom of Prester John. And if we can get there, we can kind of help him out. He's got kind of surrounded by enemies there. So the first country that goes out is Portugal. Portugal goes out and sort of looks and says, okay, so if all this area here is cut off, then what do we do? And the Portuguese, if you can see with the yellow lines, their move is down the coast, and then their move is eventually around the coast and over to India, and then they make their way into the Spice Islands in Japan in order to kind of get into this spice trade, which is going to be the biggest moneymaker for them. Again, more motives, economic. It's that water route to Asia. Since the trade has been cut off, where do you get your spices? Well, you go over and you go around the Turks by way of water. And then finding Prester John, not to belabor that, but it's there. So Prince Henry the Navigator goes up. Now, he's not himself a navigator, but he does do a lot of financing, so he throws money, and I'm doing a dollar sign even though they weren't using dollars, but you get the idea, to go and explore the West African coastline. The idea is to look for gold, because gold would enrich Portugal and allow them to do more things, but it really kind of gets the expansionist era going. And this is the big thing. He creates a school for people to come to and learn navigation. And then they go out and they create more maps and find new places, which increases the knowledge that Portugal has of the outside world, which allows for more education, and it kind of all falls in there, which is great if you can hold on to all of your secrets, which they couldn't. Major explorers, Bartolomeo Diaz in 1488 rounds the southern tip of Africa. Vasco da Gama sails to India in 1489, and all of a sudden you've got real stuff coming in, and this is a real hit to the Italian trade monopoly, because guess what? Italy is solidly situated in the Mediterranean, and they can't really get ships out too well because the Turks have taken over the Mediterranean. And then you have Amerigo Vespucci. He goes out, he explores Brazil. He's probably the first person who realized that this was actually a new place and not just some place in the Indies. And so he got a map maker to actually name America after him. So that's where the name America comes. And then, of course, here are all these explorations. Now, I should say, and this is something important to note, that the actual explorers are not going to be emphasized on the AP exam now. The motivations are important. What they do when they get there is important. How they colonize is important. But the individual explorers, unlike previous years, is not important on the AP exam. And so you don't need to know about Diaz, da Gama, and all of these sorts of things, other than they're making these moves for Portugal. All right. Now then, there's the issue of Brazil. And Brazil is the one place where the Portuguese set up a real colony. All their other places are like trading posts. But they set up a major colony, and this becomes the largest destination of African slaves in the entire slave trade. Sugar being the biggest and most labor-intensive product coming out of this. And so what you end up with in Brazil, because of the way they go about doing this, is a mix where you have whites, you have Amerindians, and you have black slaves. Amerindians, Native Americans, Indians, whatever it is that we want to call them, and they're all those names are political baggage, so there's no real good way to do this. But today in Brazil, you have a very, very stratified and very multi-layered racial division within the country between a lot of different people. So Spain. You know what? I'm going to do Spain in the next one. So let's stop right there with Portugal, and that's a good stopping place. So thanks for watching, and I'll have more on Spain the next time.